Live from Orlando, Florida, you're now listening to the OZone Podcast, the voice of Orlando Magic fans. Join us every week for a unique fan perspective on all of the latest Magic news and updates. The show starts now.
What's up, Magic fans? Welcome back to another episode of the OZone Podcast, brought to you by DraftKings and part of the Basketball Podcast Network. We're your hosts, Al, myself, Anthony. Today is Friday, June 10th, and we're exactly 2 weeks away from the NBA draft. And in today's episode, we have a very special guest joining us, credentialed NBA draft analyst, Richard Stayman, also known as Mavs Draft. What's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good, man. We are really looking forward to picking your brain about the NBA draft. Just because Al and I, we're pretty simple. Al already has his favorite. I have my favorite. We kind of need someone to really break down on not necessarily who's right and who's wrong, but to really focus on, you know, the pros and cons of each. But before we get into the NBA draft, Richard, I noticed that on your bio on your Twitter, it says that you're a sneakerhead. So I have to ask, when it comes to influential shoes, you're a sneakerhead. Influential shoes. I feel like the Orlando Magic, just signature shoes from the Orlando Magic. We have an okay catalog, right? Tracy McGrady, the pennies. Maybe we can throw a little bit of Shaq in there. But when you look at signature shoes inspired by the Orlando Magic, which one really stands out to you specifically?
Hey, shout out to Dwight Howard, who had the Adidas line. I forget what they were called, but he did have his own. I was a big fan of those just because I love Dwight Howard. But man, the T-Max take the cake, I think. I was a huge fan of those. And I know Jabari Smith has been wearing some Adidas. Maybe he's the next Adidas athlete. I mean, it seems to be a thing. Half those guys, I mean, technically, if you count Reebok as Adidas, because that's their parent company. I mean, stars are in the what's the phrase? Stars are in the writing or whatever, or the writing's in the star, or something like that.
That's right. He actually touched a little bit on it today during his presser for his workout for the Orlando Magic. Says that he has his people kind of handling that, and he was told just to focus on basketball. But I think that for the most part, Adidas kind of ran away with the Orlando Magic market in a sense. I believe there were pro models, if I'm not mistaken, like Dwight Howard's own version of the pro models. Between the Tracy McGrady's one, the T-Mac 1s and 2s, which one would you say is probably the best one out of the line?
I feel like the 2s are more iconic. Maybe the one I like the 2s a little bit more personally. They're also the ones I used to play with on 2K and stuff, so they got me into that. So I'm gonna go with the 2s.
Yeah, I think so too. Have you seen the 3s? Have you seen the T-Mac 3s?
No, but I'm Googling them now.
They're not
and
pretty.
I am interested to find. Oh,
yeah,
man.
They look like the T-Mac 2s, but like way less like room for laces. Like there's like
they look hideous. I forgot
space
about
in the
those.
middle.
I forgot about those. Yeah, those are bad.
Yeah, they're not good. They're not good at all. Al, what would you say?
It's got to be the T-Max, man. I think like you guys mentioned already, those are the most iconic. Although we cannot forget about the pennies, though, right? Like you think about history, the Magic. Those are, I think, the most iconic to me personally. But I think the T-Mac, just a generation as a whole, sneakers became a thing. I think even more in that generation with the MJs. So I think those are more recognizable. But the pennies to this day, when you see them on the players and stuff, they pop right away. And you think about the Magic right away when you see them.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that, because something that I kind of wish the Orlando Magic would adopt, very similar to how Charlotte was the first one to adopt the Jumpman logo on their jerseys before it was kind of rolled out to, you know, the rest of the NBA. How sick would it be if, you know, we were able to get the 1 cent logo on the jerseys instead of the Jumpman?
I would take that in a heartbeat.
Amazing, right?
I like that idea.
I need to put that somewhere when I can get credit for it. All right, Richard. So quick question for you. So you go by, your handle is Mavs Draft. You live in Dallas, Texas. What makes you keep an eye on the Orlando Magic? Like, how does that even come about?
Yeah. It's funny because like I'm in this weird middle ground where, you know, there's always like a cloud of, oh, you like the Magic? Oh, you like the Mavs? Which depending on who I talk to. I was actually born in Orlando, lived there for the first few years of my life. And this is very indicative of my personality. I was indecisive. I still am. my parents are like, so are you going to be a Magic, Mavs fan? When we moved here, I was 5 years old, and I'm like, both. And it just hasn't faded. And like, I was 10 years old when they drafted Dwight Howard, which is what got me into the draft. And I, ever since then, I never abandoned them. I had a lot of people saying, all right, 2012, like, so you're just Mavs now, right? And I'm like, no, this made me want to be a Magic fan even more, just because like I hadn't seen the bottom in my whole memorable life, understanding what was happening when I was like 6 or 8, something like that. They had it, I guess, that 1 year when I was 8 or 9, but I couldn't fathom that quite like I can now.
That's pretty awesome. So I think if the Magic and Mavs ever met in the finals, though, how would that play out?
No, absolutely not. You know, it is hard even when they play in the regular season, because there's always something. I couldn't do it. 2009 was close. 2000, I think, God, the whole pretty much 2007 to 2012 was a scary, scary window.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's exciting though. I guess it's two teams in different conferences. You kind of keep an eye on each one. They play usually on different time slots. You can get to watch the Magic game first, and then catch up on the Mavs game after. So it's kind of cool. I like that thinking. I mean, kind of similar to me. So I was always a player fan initially, a Vince Carter fan. Stephen Curry, as Vince aged, moved to Orlando in 2016, and I liked him from afar. Like, I'll follow the Magic. Vince played here, so that's really what got me into the Magic, and Dwight Howard as well. Moved to Orlando, and as my listeners know now, I haven't missed a game. My wife and I go to every game here at home, so we're now diehard Magic fans to the T. But like right now, the Warriors are in the finals. I'm rooting for Steph. I'm watching every game. I'm deep into it, but it will never be the same as the Magic again. I get where you're coming from. It's challenging though when they play against each other. Like, who do you root for? It's not easy.
Yeah, I personally love the connection. You guys got Daryl Armstrong. We took Coach Most away from you. In the future, maybe a little Luka. It all makes sense. Like, it's
Jameer
all
Nelson.
kind of connecting a little bit. Yeah, Jameer.
That's right.
Exactly. That's right. So I love the connection all around, for sure.
Now, another connection recently is Coach Mosley. So Mosley coached the Mavs, assistant coach for the Mavs for many years. He's now the head coach of the Orlando Magic. So as you were watching him the past few years as a Mavs fan, is there anything that we don't know about him yet that our listeners should be aware of? Any kind of inside information on Coach Mosley that we can kind of learn from you?
Yeah, coaching insight is actually one of my weaknesses. The one thing I really do know about Mosley, and I think this kind of showed, but it didn't get talked about a lot with his first year impact, and that's that he clicks with his players. Like, he is a very player-friendly coach. That's why a lot of Mavs fans, myself included, before Jason Kidd, we were very much in the camp of, hey, get the guy Luka respects. He knows he clicks with all the guys. But I in hindsight, I'm happy with how it played out. But you know, I think it was very obvious. I think a prime example is Mo Bamba seeing the most minutes of his career, probably the best year of his career, and I think he just clicks with his guys, and he's somebody who I wish the Magic had a year earlier to go through that year zero of that rebuild and just have a full offseason with. But I think the franchise is in good hands with him. He's at the bare minimum, somebody who hands the keys over well for whoever comes in next, because he won't be here forever.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that quickly we found out about Coach Moats is how hands-on he is. I think that from the early clips that we saw during the offseason of him actually being on the court, spending that extra time with Mo Bamba, showing him some low post move, like literally his first day with the Orlando Magic after his press conference. You can really see that that's his unique way of being able to adapt and to really show, get the respect from the players. Because I mean, previously Coach Clifford, you're looking at Frank Vogel, Scott Skiles, like, these are guys that really couldn't do exactly what Coach Mose is able to do in his way of doing it.
Yeah, and I agree. It's just it's very easy for him to convey the message. You look at the press conference, like his first day, he was talking about the books he's read and stuff to click with his guys. He just has a good feel of what the right steps are to do the right thing. And then once he gets to that decision, what's the right thing, I think he's going to be on the right side of it. Obviously, X's and O's, I think his system is hard to figure out, because the only thing we really know, in my opinion, is just that two centers can coexist in it, right? We saw Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter coexist. And to me, that means couple of things. One, he's going to get creative with log jams. Hopefully he does that, find something with the guards. But the other thing is, say Chet Holmgren comes here, or even Jabari Smith, or Paolo. I mean, all the top 3 picks, they're likely choices are front court players. So maybe a little bit of foreshadowing, especially for Chet. If Chet is the pick, we now know what it will look like. We have a system of what it looks like for him.
Yeah, and I think that this upcoming season is going to be really tough for him in terms of kind of, because there's not a whole lot of minutes to go around with all the different young pieces that we have. Throwing the number 1 pick on top of that is going to be interesting to see, kind of his plan and his strategy and how he's going to roll everything out. But kind of moving on to the draft, the Orlando Magic won the number 1 pick. I mean, what was your initial thoughts all the way from Dallas? Like, with the Orlando Magic being your second favorite team of all time, like how excited were you? What were your initial thoughts? Is this the perfect time for the Magic to really, get that number 1 pick and kind of really steam forward with the future of this now, what seems to be a very, very fast rebuild?
Yeah. After the last few years of seeing them beat the Pistons in garbage time to get the 6th pick, it was really nice to see the lottery balls turn a different way. Unfortunately, this is probably the year that you don't want the first pick out of like the last of all the years they've been tanking over the last 10 years. But I'm happy with it, right? Like I went down the whole line. I was like, God, please don't let this be the year the 14 goes in. And every year I was just convincing myself something bad would happen. And then I saw them get into the top 4 and I'm like, all right, whatever happens, it's really no bad outcome. The worst would be 4, obviously, because Ivy potentially. But I saw Sacramento with 4 and I was like, all right, we're in business no matter what happens. And then I just kept seeing it and seeing it. And I was like jumping. I'm like, no way. Like I never thought I'd see it because I was too young to remember 2004's lottery at this point. But I'm happy. I think they're in a great position. If they want, I think they could move back to 3 and not see any consequences. I don't think anybody's really going to buy. I think Oklahoma City and Houston are in a position where they're just content with taking who's left. But ultimately, I think I really trust Orlando. I trust this front office to make a good decision, and I'm confident.
I mean, what do you believe is the most important thing for the Magic right now? You bring up a valid point. Like this year, there's no consensus. Like we could have gotten the 2nd or the 3rd pick, and we would have been just as excited. The great thing and what I love most about us winning the number 1 pick is that it feels like time after time we've always been that 1-2 player away from being able to get the Luka, the Trae Youngs, whatever the case may be, and we just missed out. But now, kind of we hold our own future in our hands where we can decide. All right, we're not taking leftovers. We're going to be able to pick our guy. With that being said, with no consensus, Paolo, Jabari, Chet, they're 3 completely different guys that bring 3 completely different things to the table. What do you think right now is most important for the Magic going into the draft? Like, what do you think is needed for us to not just next season improve, not just to, make it to the play-in, but to actually be, a team that's respected in the future?
Yeah. So first, I want to preface this with I see the light on all 3. I get each avenue. Anthony, I think I know who you're going with as your number 1 choice.
Without a doubt.
It's going to be really hard to tell, but I see the light on all 3, right? But my thing is, I think they need to find somebody that's going to be a franchise changer. They have a lot of guys. Franz is probably the closest thing to it right now. They have some very good players in the mix, and I also think this is something I love preaching. This last year was year 1, I would call it, of the rebuild. The trade is on that. It's kind of year 0. They had a month and a half.
Yeah.
I don't really count that as year 1 of the rebuild. After that, like they got the 5th pick. What was it? 4th pick? No, they got 5th. They had 5th and 8th. And even if Jalen Suggs never turns it around, they still got a great outcome in the draft getting Franz Wagner.
Yep.
Now the thing is, though, is you got to get over the hump. They have 7, maybe 8 guys that are young players that you would count as a quality piece of the core. Problem is they have too many pieces. I think to get over that hump, you got to hit on this draft, right? I really think also, yeah, people say Chet's bustable. He's probably the most because of his frame, but like there's no skill set that plays him off the court. None of these top 3 guys get played off the court. It's really special because there's no fatal flaw to these guys in terms of skill set, which injuries, like it could happen to anybody. It could happen. I mean, there's injury-prone players regardless of weight. Yeah, Porzingis doesn't exactly help, but I don't think that's a reason not to draft somebody. It's not like there's been an injury history. In fact, he had a perfectly clean bill of health. But I think you hit on this draft, you get the star power. And to me, that means you're taking Paolo or Chet. And then you have to package some of these young guys. You got to get, it's too many cooks in the kitchen right now, and you got to package them to get a high quality piece.
Yep, I completely agree. Now, if you think about the top 3 candidates, so we talked about Jabari, Chet, and Paolo as the top 3 guys. For those listeners who are just kind of getting into the draft right now, can you give me three strengths and maybe 3 weaknesses, or just whatever you want to do? Just some strengths and weaknesses to each player, why the Magic should look into the player and why they should not.
Yeah, I'll tackle it with a sales pitch for and against each of them. So I'll start with Chet Holmgren. He's my preferred candidate. He's not number 1 on my board, but he is my number 1 for Orlando. The reason I love him is you're getting one of the best shot blockers and really just rim protectors, I think, that the draft has seen in a very long time. You look at his instincts and his ability to protect the rim. It's very special. I think he played in a system that is going to be like Orlando's with Drew Timme. You have that same thing, that Wendell Moe kind of system, so he doesn't have to adjust at all. And he has more freedom. Drew Timme took a lot of the touches from him. He was probably 3rd or 4th in line, Chet, for being a playmaker, which was his big thing that made him a unicorn in high school. He was a ball handler at 7 foot, 7'1". While he's not going to be a pure ball handler, the biggest advantage he creates is in transition. He brings the ball up the floor. When a center is bringing the ball up the floor, we see this with Jokic. I think he's one of a few, him, Embiid, and probably somebody else I'm missing off the top of my head, that they bring the ball up the floor and suddenly the defense is thrown off, right? Because the center can't match step for step in transition. So there's automatically a mismatch. You have the ball handler being Chet in this situation has an easy, they're sagging off and they're willing to let him get in the paint. So he pops a 3. He loves those transition 3s. He passes to the open guard who has a big man on him, something. There's always a mismatch. So I think his role in the half court is a Mo Bamba and a lot better at it. And his entire role is just imagine if Mo Bamba was 50 to 75% better. Like if Mo hit his ceiling, that's probably what Chet is. So I think there's a more realistic chance for that. It's not exactly the sexiest sales pitch against him. Look, he's skinny. He could find himself in trouble. He could get back down. I don't think he's that great of a perimeter defender. I think he holds his own enough, but he's not somebody that I'd exactly want to be guarding point guards that I think he can get blown by. So that's my pitch against him, but those things seem pretty minimal to me. And then I can tackle Jabari and Paolo after if you guys want to take some feedback on that. I don't want to go 5 minutes straight talking.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really like about Chet is, he recently had an interview with Shams and they were talking about him playing positions 1 through 5, and he's confident about it. He doesn't like being called a center. He thinks that he can literally play any position on the floor. And I think that that's one of the things I really do like about him is that he definitely has this sense of swagger about him. And he is 190 pounds wet, but he doesn't play that way. He plays way more aggressive. He plays, with body and with strength. And, I think that you brought up a really good point. It's 190 pounds doesn't automatically mean that you're going to get injured next season. It can literally happen to anyone. In the Orlando Magic, if you've been following the team for a while, you literally know it can happen to everyone. Yep. So I think that the biggest concern that maybe the fan base has right now is that we've dealt with injuries for so long. And if we're looking at these guys just out of pure sight, we believe that he's the most likely to be injured. But you hit it on. I mean, this dude brings the ball down the court. Like I would be thrown off. It's not something that we're really used to seeing. Now, when you say that, Chet would be the ceiling of Mo Bamba, do you say that right now at this very moment, Chet would be the ceiling of Mo Bamba, or you're looking at in the future?
Yeah, I think honestly, day one, you get better output than you had from Mo Bamba. I think in the long term, you just look at what Mo Bamba could have been had everything gone right. I think he was dealt a bad hand from the get-go. Him and Clifford never meshed. We saw that pretty clearly just based on the minutes. And then also, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, I remember when he went to the first game in Dallas, a lot of his family is out here in Texas where he went to school, and he didn't even play. And I think they announced that he was like suspended or something. And it was like, they knew what they were doing. So like, it was so rocky. Imagine if you just got a restart and you got a player with just so much better feel for the game and just instincts, I think on the defensive end and really offensive too. That's what you're putting on that Mo Bamba at the same age. I think they both are old for their class. And I think that's what you get in him is day one, you get somebody, an automatic upgrade from Mo Bamba with a lot more room to grow, especially as a playmaker, which separates him.
Now, let me ask you, I keep going with the Chet conversation here. Generational talent. We think about a guy that can transform a franchise, a guy that can, be something that years from now, you may say, oh, that guy kind of changed the game in a way, kind of like what Steph did in a way. Out of the top three guys, you think Chet is that guy? I've heard that kind of being mentioned multiple times now that Chet could be that guy out of this top three guys that you look back saying you could not miss on him. Like he's one guy that years from now, you may look back and say, wow, like he transformed either the team or the way the game is played. Do you see that in him?
Yeah, I think we haven't seen a ball handler that can if he gets the ball handling, that's the big separator. If he's a ball handler in any capacity, even if it's like he's an elite transition ball handler, I think we've seen a player we haven't seen before because he's going to get his 2 blocks a game in the NBA. And just kind of for reference, this is a very, very loose stat here, but if you just go down the list of centers, or not, doesn't have to be centers, players 7 feet tall or even 6'11" that have averaged both 2 assists a game and 2 blocks per game, they're all stars. Like it's a very high level player. So for me, you add a true level of ball handling to that. That's a 1 of 1. And we talked about, I feel like NBA fans have talked about this for a while, especially in the last 10 years. Athletes are just getting better and better because of the resources that are more and more available, whether it be literally like, medications, things like that help them heal faster, just like medicine and stuff. And then also the resources of basketball skill is being taught to every single player at 5 years old, way better than it was 10, 15 years ago. So players are going to get better. He could be the pioneer to these point centers next year there's another one in Victor Wembanyama. So I think he might just be opening the floodgates.
I mean, talk to me about Jabari. Jabari was just finished his workout with Orlando today. And we were able to hear a little bit. He answered some questions from the press, and me personally, I like some of the things that I heard from his responses. He seems like a kid that is very, very well spoken. He's all about the team. He's all about the environment. But when it comes to Jabari, there's concerns. There's concerns about really his ability to be the number one guy. There's been a lot of people saying that maybe he's more of a second option, maybe even a third option. Maybe he may not be the guy to be the franchise player that a team like the Orlando Magic absolutely needs. What are your thoughts on Jabari?
Yeah, he has the number 1 floor in the draft. You look at a 6'10" player that can shoot at an elite level and defend at an elite level. You have the best 3-and-D player in the league. I mean, for comparison, there's one 6'10" 3-and-D guy in the league right now, and it's actually on the Mavs. Maxi Kleber. He is pure to that definition. He is a 3-point shooter. He does not put the ball on the floor, and he is a defender, mostly a 2-point defender. And Maxi honestly he's like average at both of those things. And it's just because he's 6'10", it makes him that much better. Now imagine if you had somebody at that height that's elite at those things, plus with the room to grow as a ball handler. Maxi cannot put the ball on the floor. Jabari can. And to me, the big thing with Jabari is you get somebody who I truly do buy that he's going to be able to create within 1 to 2 dribbles. Is that a franchise-changing talent? Maybe not. But couldn't you say all of this stuff if say the 6'6" guy from Washington State ended up being one of the best shooters of all time and a historically good defender with that 3-point shooting percentage, and he puts the ball on the floor, only a handful of times, but he's 6'6". I think you'd still take that. And that's Klay Thompson. So to me, you get him at 6'10". I don't think the shooting is that far off. I mean, we're going to start seeing, I know it's crazy to compare guys to Klay Thompson, and I don't want to put that pressure on him, but at the same time, like I said, guys are getting better and better. It's not rare to see rookies just being elite shooters in the league. I just don't think it's unheard of anymore like it once was, and I think he's on a trajectory similar to being a 6'10" Klay Thompson.
Yeah, I mean, even the floor, I think, has been mentioned as Rashard Lewis being that guy that, hey, worst case scenario, a guy that can hit a 3 and just kind of stay in the corner and be okay defensively. But again, we know he's elite on defense. And Anthony mentioned earlier, he's been my guy since day one. I think he's a guy that, in my opinion, can develop over the next few years. He's 19 years old, the youngest out of the top 3, 6'10", plays defense. And in my opinion, why I like him so much is he fits what the Magic are doing. It's a guy that can go on the floor, guard anybody 1 through 5. And on the offensive end, he can play pretty much, again, he can create a little bit. He can kind of play in the corner. He can do what you need him to do. If he learns from a guy like Franz Wagner, all he needs to do is cut and stay open in the corner. If he does that, we saw with Franz, he can be elite. Now, Franz's advantage was he could create a little bit more of the pick and roll and things like that. But again, at 19 years old, this guy's not fully developed yet. He's got years to get better at those aspects. Let me ask you this, though. What's a fair comparison? If you said, hey, this guy day one, October 31st, who's a fair comparison to who Jabari can be day one in the NBA?
Yeah, it's hard. You look, I don't even have a name. I just think that being 6'10", I mean, really Maxi Kleber, I think that's probably the closest one. The impact, though, I think could be just so much higher. You have Maxi Kleber without some liabilities and less inconsistency, so more consistent and a little bit of being able to put the ball on the floor. There's some argument to be made that an elite 3-and-D guy is a franchise changer. Like you look at Klay Thompson, he went in one of the most stacked drafts of the last 15 years, I think, in 2011. Probably the 4th best player, maybe even 3rd, depending on how you rank him, where Kyrie falls in that. And to me, look, you get that might actually be the number 1 player. So I like him a lot, and I think there's a lot of room for upside with him. But on day one, look, it wouldn't shock me if he had some hidden upside or hidden abilities that we didn't even know about, because that Auburn team was weird, right? You had Walker Kessler behind him, really on both ends, just kind of clogging the paint. And then also he had no point guards. So with a team full of too many point guards, who knows what he could do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really stood out to me from different podcasts I've listened to, and I mentioned a little bit about this on a previous episode, but his competitiveness, where he really takes everything super serious. Like there's no day off with him. It's a practice. It's the mentality. Is just a littlest thing when it comes to him competing. He wants to do it and wants to do it 110, 120%. When you look at a team like the Orlando Magic that really shot not the greatest from behind the arc, it's hard to turn down a guy that shot above 40%. It's hard to turn down a guy that he's elite defensive. He's an elite defensive player on the perimeter. I like the idea of luckily we have a player like Franz, but before Franz, when it came to guarding the Giannis, a LeBron, a Durant, we really didn't have that guy. We couldn't rely on a player like Jonathan Isaac to stay healthy. Franz now at least makes me feel a little more comfortable. But knowing a player like Jabari would take that assignment, especially early on, that's the part that kind of really makes me say, man, maybe Jabari is that guy. But then the moment that I convince myself that Jabari is that guy, then I'm just reminded about Paolo, and then it kind of goes all out the window. So talk to me about Paolo. Why is Paolo that guy? I feel like Paolo's your number 1. Is that accurate?
No, actually, Jabari Smith is. I threw you a curveball. I felt like
the energy was there. We made eye contact, and I felt like Paolo was weird there. I guess not. But talk to me about Paolo.
Yeah, no, I think if you talk about a guy who can get you to be a first option, because I don't think Chet Holmgren is. I didn't touch on that, but he's more of an off-ball player to me offensively for the most part. Transitions when he's most on ball, but you look at a true first option in the half court, Paolo Banchero is the option, right? He's 6'10". I think he's a 3-level scorer. I have some concerns about his fundamentals a little bit. Just the things that are just my biggest pet peeves of come on, why are you doing this? He doesn't know angles on post entry passes. I'd argue a third. I'm just guesstimating here. A third of his turnovers were probably just horrible post entry passes to Mark Williams, which is very hard to do because he has a standing reach of 9'9". So almost everything is in his range, but things like that really do scare me. It's not like those exact situations are going to happen in the NBA. Who cares if you're not going to be able to make a post up? It's more about the fundamentals of, hey, are you going to just forget? It's kind of a switch for you. And then also he just gets mad tunnel vision at the rim. He gets a putback. He does not pass out of it. One of my absolute biggest pet peeves, but the positives are just ridiculously strong. You look at, I think and I want to end that with, he still has a good basketball IQ. It's just just those two things, come on, fix that. And I don't know how much that actually weighs, but you look at a guy who's comfortable with both hands. I think he sees cutters very well. I think a lot of his assists were good with 2 cutters. He's got a good back to the basket game a little bit. If he needs to play bully ball, He can play off ball too. I think he can spot up well. He sees over defenses, and he's a good defender when he turns it on. But you look at just the scoring ability, his ability just to take it between the legs, like just casual move and then just step back, pop, and it goes in. And that's just a very, very difficult play to stop at 6'10". And it's not anything complex. It's just you look at a guy with that size, that scoring ability, and his creation package is going to get better. How do you stop that?
Now, I got to ask you, Richard, I've heard the comparison to Jason Tatum quite a bit. A thicker Jason Tatum is kind of what I keep hearing out there. Do you see that in his game? Do you see kind of that small forward, kind of smallish power forward in him? Because again, to me, Tatum is a different player overall, but maybe I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I see shades. It's hard to compare Paolo. I really don't know who else goes in that boat. I would have had to, man, I got to look up the 6'10" guys that score 20 points a game that aren't like post players, 6'10" and above. Because I feel like, I mean, Tatum obviously isn't 6'10", but I think he's just slow Tatum. I think slower Tatum is how I see him, and just a little bit less, not a little bit, I would say just less consistent on defenses. There's so many shades offensively that I think it's actually a pretty decent one. You look at their pre-draft scouting reports, it's almost 1-to-1.
I feel some of the knock that we hear from Paolo is his shooting from behind the 3-point line. And I think that if his percentage was a lot higher, I think that we would hear his name more in the top 1 conversations, where I feel like he's been left out a lot. Him hiring Mike Miller and working with him in the offseason, I mean, do you see him being a player that can really do that type of damage from behind the line? We know that he can have a post game. We know that he has good ball handling skills. We know that he can do a lot of those things. But when it comes from shooting, is again one of the biggest drawbacks from the Orlando Magic. It's just something that we're not good at, and we need desperate help in that area. Could Paolo be that guy? Do you see him 2-3 years down the line being able to shoot at a high level?
Yeah, and this is one of the things why I have Jabari over him for the Magic is you look at the Magic over the last 10 years. Can you name more at a season where they had more than 2 good off-ball shooters? Because like Vucevic doesn't count for this, not off-ball, like primarily off-ball players. And, you know, I don't think the answer is yes. Or I don't think that there's more than, sorry, it's not a yes or no question. I don't think the answer is more than like Terrence Ross and Evan Fournier. Like that was pretty much it. And with Paolo, I think he can play off ball. I think he's obviously going to be primarily on ball. This is like kind of a concern for me. I think he can play as a spot up shooter. How willing is he? Like that's almost my thing. A lot of his stuff is just how willing is he to do it. I mean, you talk about defense, minimizing some mistakes in the paint. Like how willing are you to overcome those? And it's going to come down to work ethic for him.
It's funny you mentioned that, because that has been my biggest concern with him. I don't know what it is, but just my eye test. For whatever reason, I love his game. I love his offensive game, especially. But there's something about his game that I've always been like, I don't know what it is, but it could be that will he have the drive, to do the little things, defensively, offensively, to stay in the corner while others create, especially on the Magic when you have, Markelle Fultz handling the ball a lot, Cole Anthony, Suggs. Will he be the best fit? And again, he may be a great player 5-10 years from now, but on the Magic, will he thrive the same way that he might fit, somewhere else, OKC, wherever else that may be? But thank you so much again for that feedback, Richard, on Paolo, Chet, and Jabari. I know our listeners have been kind of hearing those names. And again, thank you for letting us know your feedback on those guys. Because again, we're all changing minds. My guy has been Jabari for a while. But like Anthony mentioned, there are moments where I'm like, wait, but Chet kind of has the potential to be a great player. What if we drafted him? But let me ask you this. If the Magic traded down, so let's say for some reason they did not fall in love with either one of those 3 guys. Very unlikely, but it could happen. Who would be the 4th guy in this draft that you're like, hey, the Magic should really go after that guy?
It's not Jaden Ivey. You got to stay away from guards this year. This is just a consequence of the last several years of transactions. You kind of just put yourself in a situation where you say it's fine. It's also not a very guard-heavy draft. I personally, my number 5 player, it's my number 5 or number 6 player. My number 5 is Benedict Mathurin, who we talk about. I mean, just a minute ago, I referenced it. How many times did the Magic have a bunch of off-ball players? And I think he can be an off-ball player now for the first 2 years and then potentially grow as a little bit of an on-ball player or just be so elite of playing off ball as an on-ball player where, like, he spots up fake, drives to the basket. Like that kind of stuff. I think he could get elite at being just everything that encompasses off ball. And then the other would be Keegan Murray. Yes, he will be 22 by the start of the season. But you look at a guy who plays great defense. He was the number one option on his score or as a scorer on Iowa. And it's tough to do that. Him and Johnny Davis had that mold down of being that number one option, playing great defense. And somebody with his size, I think he can create a little bit, doesn't turn the ball over. For me, that's my number one thing I look at for these high volume players is how much do they turn it over. And he's very mistake free. It's actually almost historically good how low turnover he is. And just one use case of where that's worked of a polarizing player who didn't turn the ball over, but had the ball in his hands a ton. It's very early, but Cam Thomas has actually looked like a good player, didn't turn the ball over, despite always shooting and having the ball in his hands, didn't turn it over. And that seems to be, I know that's just one example, but there's others in the past. The low turnover rate is a very good predictor of NBA success, I think. And, you got a power forward who can create his own shot. That'd be very good for this team.
And then Richard, kind of looking into, we're not only looking at the number one pick, we also have the 32nd and the 35th pick. Picks that are extremely valuable because they're really high in the second round. The Magic also have a pattern, a history of not keeping those second round picks for whatever reason. But when you look at the players that would be available in the second round, what should the Magic do with them? Should we package them to try and move up? Could we really find value as we've seen in the playoffs where these second round players are really doing a lot of damage and they are able to be developed and contribute? What should the Magic do with the second round picks?
Yeah, my favorite package for the Mavs is trading 26 for either 30 and 34 with Oklahoma City or 32 and 35 with the Magic. I think it benefits both sides. I don't think the Magic have a need to develop 3 rookies. Even if they draft and stash one of them, I just don't think they need to be making 3 draft picks. What'll probably happen, just knowing this front office, they'll probably move them up for the 25th pick, sell the 25th pick or something. They love not using the 25th plus pick in drafts, but I think this year you really have to. You look at the depth from, I would say 15 on my board. I would be very shocked if starting at 15, which is Nikola Jovic on my board, down to the 45th, 46th guy, that's one whole tier. So you're going to get somebody on that, probably multiple players in my top 25. So for me, I would say you're going to get somebody at both of those picks. You're very likely to get somebody because teams are going to see it differently. No 2 people have the same board. No 2 teams have the same board. There's a lot of names out there that stand out. If you don't mind me giving some specifics, I think Jalen Williams from Arkansas, not the one from Santa Clara that's risen really highly. I would have loved him there, but Jalen Williams from Arkansas, if they don't go with a traditional big, he'd be somebody interesting because he's not an above the rim player, but he can be a small ball 5 or a versatile 5 that just does a bit of everything. Wendell Moore from Duke, we could get in. I mean, that's a shooter. That's a guy who shoots, passes, and defends very well. And I would say there's somebody else that I really like, which is Ron Harper Jr. from Rutgers. I think he's climbing right now. He's got super long arms, measured really well in the combine, has an over 7-foot wingspan, NBA pedigree, which I'm sure the Magic don't mind. And I think just, again, that off-ball threat, I've been campaigning for him to be in Orlando for a while. At 35, I would be all for it. One name I think that could surprise people by being there is somebody like Jaden Hardy or Marjon Beauchamp. I think very well one of the G League Ignite guys is going to drop. And I would start with Beauchamp, even though he's got a bad jump shot. I'd rather gamble on him than Jaden Hardy, but one of those two will be there, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, definitely exciting to see what the Magic will do with those second-round picks. I mean, I think what we keep hearing the most is package them, maybe even with Terrence Ross, to a contender. That, again, it's going to use those second-round picks. They don't want the fully guaranteed contracts, and the Magic can jump up into the 20 range, maybe even, hopefully, high 20s. But then again, we'll see how that all plays out. But definitely a lot to consider for the team here over the next couple of weeks. Now, last question about the draft. So we're kind of putting you here on the hot seat and saying, hey, what do you think the Magic will actually do? So we know, again, we have our favorites. Me and you like Jabari, and likes Paolo. Plenty of people like Chet. What do you think they will actually do on draft night here over just a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think they take Jabari Smith. He just fits the elite shooting. I think it's Jabari Smith.
You don't think that the connection with Jalen Suggs and Chet has any kind of impact on the draft here this year?
No, I don't. I think they should take Chet because of that upside. But I think they're going to fall in love with the shooting and defense. I think the defense is such an identity. I know Chet brings that, but I think they're going to fall in love with Jabari's shooting ability and potential. Maybe they buy the ability to grow as a ball handler.
Truthfully, I that's exactly what I see. Vegas also agrees that Jabari is going number 1. So, how often is Vegas wrong, right? But Richard, I want to say thank you so much for joining us and kind of giving us some gems on all these players. I think that now that we have one down with the workout of Jabari, me personally, I'm kind of hoping that Paolo comes in and kind of surprises everyone and knocks the socks out of Jeff and John and really, kind of compete, because I would love to hear Paolo's name at least mention a couple more in the discussions of the number 1. But for our listeners, Richard, where can they find you? Where can they follow you? If they want to get a little more of your content.
Yeah, the hub is @Mavs Draft on Twitter. Everything goes through there. And then I'm also on Locked On NBA Big Board is what it's called now. It used to be Locked On NBA Draft. We're 5 times a day on that show. Rafael Barlow has been killing it. So been a privilege being with him, but we got a ton of good content on there as well.
All right. Awesome. Richard, I appreciate you so much for joining us. And that's a wrap. We'll catch you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the OZone Podcast, the voice of Magic fans. For all the latest Orlando Magic news and updates, follow us on Twitter @The Ozone Pod and on Instagram @Orlando Magic HQ. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on all your favorite podcast listening platforms.